Danke, bitteschön. Yeah. That's all good.
Yeah.
So just doing the Q and so it will kind of be recorded. We got not the Q&A at the end, but just to let you know, like it's all out there. You have to shut up. It's you don't have to, but
maybe. Not sure. We're trying this, so we'll see how it works.
Okay, well, if we just talk in German all the time, we
we're
talking about anyway.
But we can like especially could be in German because Jeff is doing something in German right now. Danke, bitteschön.
Yeah.
That's all good.
Yeah.
So just to let you know if you ask questions. So,
have you learned the bad words?
And actually, why I'm just about it, we took some photos during the wine tasting, and we're about to put them on Facebook. So if you don't want you to be on it, just we haven't put them out yet. So you can just say to me now if you say no, I don't want to be on Facebook or something else. But otherwise. So if you just like in the break, if you don't come to me and say no, I don't want to be in any of these pictures, I will put you just. I don't have them yet, so they're good. I've got both.
Yeah. 5 photos.
No, we won't take this kind of pictures.
Okay.
We won't take this kind of pictures, but just like.
So,
We're recording.
All right, great. So thank you for having me, and Tim and Sabine asked me to talk about entrepreneurial ecosystems. And so I have a kind of an overview of what we're going to be talking about. As Tim mentioned, I'm recording some of this. We're going to try to live stream this, and I'll use it in my class that I teach. It's a master's class called MCOM 5312, which is Media Management, Entrepreneurship, and Consulting. So that's what the course is, and they do a module. What we're talking about today, they have to do an assignment, so I thought it would be nice to try to share this with them. So that's what's going on with that. So again, a little bit of an overview of what I'd like to cover today, and of course, this is not going to take an hour and a half, so we'll have time for questions as I'm going, and we'll have lots of time for questions and discussion points at the end. A lot more we'll cover tomorrow as well. This will go nicely with what we talk about with what's hot in media management tomorrow. And this topic of entrepreneurial ecosystems really goes nicely with the industry speaker we had earlier in the week and with Tim's research and some of the research you guys are doing. So you'll see some things you've seen before. So anyway, what I would like to try to cover today in my time with you is explaining a little bit about this concept of entrepreneurial ecosystems, what that is, what that means, kind of where it was developed, who is discussing that regularly, and what are some components of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Of course, an entrepreneurial ecosystem isn't limited to media entrepreneurship, but I'm going to show you some examples of media entrepreneurship ecosystems and components within that. Now, just like it sounds, an ecosystem involves many different components. Some of those components are the things we've been talking about and studying and you guys are researching and working on. So you have cooperative working spaces, you have accelerators, you have incubators. Universities play a key role in these ecosystems, at least in the United States, and I think to some extent internationally. And then particularly internationally, you'll see the government is playing a very vital role in setting policy and setting funding, creating initiatives that provide money and funds for some of these efforts in entrepreneurship. So we're going to break down some of these individually later, and because this is a doctoral seminar, we're going to talk about some theoretical perspectives, some theories that we can use to examine some questions of this. One of the things I'm going to do is take us back to New York, like Tim, and use some of the research that I've been working on, a paper that I presented at the World Media Economics Management Conference. So I'll share a case with there, and then share some other cases and research that I'm doing, and we can use that as a discussion point for this. Now, there's other things within media entrepreneurship I'm happy to talk about, and again, we'll talk about some of this tomorrow when we talk about what's hot in media management. Because media entrepreneurship is on fire right now. So that's kind of the plan. Any questions on that? All right, let's go. All right, so an entrepreneurial ecosystem is thought to naturally emerge in locations with geographic specific assets. So what you're increasingly finding is in a geographic region, you tie and build out an ecosystem that plays to your strengths. The classic example that everyone thinks of, that everyone aspires to be, is Silicon Valley in the United States, where we were at last year. So obviously Silicon Valley is where you have tech innovation. So that's the high, that's where Google and Twitter and Facebook and all of these major media tech companies are located. So everyone wants to be Silicon Valley. But what's important, increasingly, is to not be like Silicon Valley, to play to your strengths, to look at your assets, and do that. So Steve Case, did anyone remember Steve Case name? Since this is Europe, you may not, but Sabine's...
AOL.
Yeah, so he was the founder of AOL, or America Online. And now what he does is he does what Tim looked at. He does investing. So he has a venture capital firm that funds startups. And he had a book that came out, and before the book, he kind of went on a circuit tour, what he calls the rise of the rest. So he believes that crowdfunding in particular is enabling the rise of the rest, not Silicon Valley, that places in the United States like Raleigh-Durham, places like Austin, Texas, places like, I'm trying to think, lots of other ecosystem, lots of other towns that you've never heard of, perhaps Pittsburgh, probably heard of the Steelers, but other regions now are wanting to build up their system and their entrepreneurial efforts, attract startups, and have ties to the region. And so he talks about the rise of the rest. There's about 10 to 12 cities he goes to every year that has competitions where startups can compete for money that he funds personally. And so that's kind of this idea within entrepreneurial ecosystems. Yes, everyone would like to create the next Silicon Valley. And as we look at some of the examples, you'll see everyone likes to use the little term like, we're going to create Silicon Alley in New York and Berlin. We're going to create Silicon Beach in Wilmington, North Carolina at the beach. So everyone wants to create the next Silicon. But these ecosystems are in lots of other different core areas. All right. Yeah, so again, what is important in that area is that you have something that's headquartered locally and kind of homegrown within your area. All right, so cooperative working spaces and incubators. I started calling these things CalSci's, but those are three separate things. They're not, you can have a cooperative working space that doesn't have an accelerator. You can have an accelerator that's not part of a cooperative working space program. So they can all be separately distinct, but increasingly what you're finding, what I'm seeing in my research and otherwise, is that a lot of cooperative working spaces are incorporating all of these resources all in a group. So a cooperative working space is where an individual freelancer, an individual consultant can have space. So you may have someone that works in a big company and their primary location is elsewhere. When they come to a different town, because that company has an office, or maybe the company does have an office there, but they do a client, so they're doing research there, they need a place to work. So they may have access to like a single desk or a shared open workspace where they're working together, they can print, they have Wi-Fi that works and is reliable, and you don't have to reset every 30 minutes. Just kidding. But that's something that, as a businessman, as a startup, as an entrepreneur, Wi-Fi is key, right? So you have a shared working space that you can rent. It's cheaper than buying an office, because when you're a startup, like with your company, you probably can't afford yet to go rent your own office. So the idea behind these cooperative working spaces offers something for all levels of people. You start out there, and then as you scale and as you grow your business, you can have a private office you have a post office, mailbox, shared printing space, all these kind of things. And then they have an entire floor as your company grows and scales. So you're there working with other startups, with other entrepreneurs in this shared workspace. Now, these cooperative working spaces provide a series of resources to the workers, right? Because if you're a startup, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a nascent entrepreneur that's just starting out, you might not know what you're doing, right? So you need mentoring, you need access to capital, you need legal services, you need design services. And so you have all of these things in this one-stop shop. Now, an accelerator is a fixed-term, cohort-based program including mentorship and educational that often culminate in a public pitch event and usually referred to as a demo day. In the United States, there's about 200 to 300 U.S. accelerators as of 2014 and growing. There's more internationally as well. Sometimes people use the term accelerator and incubator interchangeably, and they are similar, but technically, by the definition, as an accelerator tends to accelerate, tends to be quick, tends to have mentoring as a component. Sometimes there's financial resources contributed, and it ends in that pitch day. So our guest speaker earlier in the week was talking about that, going to Hamburg, going to Berlin, going to a number of events. Since they invest in mature companies, these are usually all the criteria. Some will be more mature that they're investing in. Some will be relatively new. But so it's an opportunity to see which startups are emerging from that ecosystem. So what's Berlin's next big hot startup? What's Wilhelmshaven's next big startup? And, so if you look downstairs, they have posters for the startup challenge that they do here for student startups. So that's an accelerator. An incubator tends to be a longer period of incubation, classically, historically. Usually that can be anywhere between 1 to 5 years in assisting the startup. And here you get, so it's different than the preset time. The other thing that you have with incubators is it can be something that you have the idea for. With an accelerator, it's usually your idea. Like you have an existing company, like your podcasting, right? So you would look for an accelerator that has expertise in this area, and you're going and getting assistance and guidance. With an incubator, it may be that they have the ideas and they need someone externally to come run and develop it, so they recruit externally to come to that. There's a famous guy in California that I heard a few years ago that looks at his company basically as an incubator. They have all sorts of ideas, lots of good ideas, and they recruit externally for people to come develop them for them in exchange for equity. So that's the difference is incubator and accelerator. And then anecdotally, there's a lot of evidence that are suggesting that these cooperative working spaces, these accelerators and the incubators are existing within these entrepreneurial ecosystems. And there's hundreds of examples of these all across the United States, all across the country within these ecosystems. Now, the concept, now we'll get a little bit into kind of academic-y literature and resource stuff before going back into examining these, what the components are with that. So Eisenberg has written a lot about entrepreneurial ecosystems. In a 2010 article, he talks about public leaders should follow 9 principles when building an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And this comes from an academic article that outlines, again, some of this. So this is a study that Eisenberg did. He's sort of the main person to advance this notion of entrepreneurial ecosystems. So the first one is stop being Silicon Valley. There will be another Silicon Valley. Play on your own strengths. Don't be Silicon Valley. Don't try to be the next Silicon Valley. The second advice or component that he offers to public leaders is shape the ecosystem around local conditions. So again, I'm from North Carolina, and we'll talk about that as one of the examples later. But if you look at, aside from entrepreneurship, the Research Triangle Park is where I come from, Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill, and that was built in the 60s. You have companies like Cisco, IBM, Glaxo, GSK, a lot of medical, a lot of computer companies there. And so that is very much a high-tech region. The Triangle is a high-tech region. It's also a high medical region because of the GSKs and the biomedical with the 3 universities there, Duke, NC State, and North Carolina. And so that ecosystem supports biomedical, that ecosystem supports technology because you have those assets that are there. So that's something important. Again, what are your local strengths? Are you in a region that has a strong healthcare component? Are you in an area? So again, outside of the media concept, what are your strengths? What are your synergies with that? The other thing is, within an ecosystem, you have private industry, right? Startups, most of them usually tend to be private companies that are emerging from this ecosystem. So you have to have the private sector's involvement from the beginning. And with these efforts, what's happening is private sector are launching cooperative working spaces. It's private companies that are launching incubators to bring in outside talent to be exposed to new ideas and new ways of thinking, like the guest speaker spoke about the other day. You have to, the fourth component is stress the roots of new ventures. So again, stress what is going to get those strengths play to, what is the new thing within that. Number 5, you have to let these grow organically. Don't over-engineer the clusters. So the idea of an ecosystem is similar in the literature from like an innovation cluster or cluster. There's other overlays of terminology that's used. Basic same idea. So you want to emphasize ambitious entrepreneurship. This is a place that supports entrepreneurship either in terms of funding, in terms of tax write-offs, in terms of space, facilities, all of these kind of things, access to mentoring, access to guidance. So that's one of the things regions want to do, and the reason they're doing it is to keep talent locally there. But it has to kind of come organically, naturally, not saying we're going to overplay that. The idea of diversifying your portfolio, right? You don't want all your proverbial basket. But you're always looking for the next hit, right? 1 out of 10 may be successful, may give a return on the portfolio. So you want to favor high potentials. There's certain things that you can suspect may be better or in an area of need, which is why when we start breaking down some of these examples, media companies are looking at things that are tangentially related to their company so that they can branch out from beyond news to television, broadcasting, into things like gamification, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, new payment methods, location-based services, mobile devices, social networking, things that are related, advertising, new forms of advertising, drone delivery, etc., and so on and so forth. But ultimately, in these ecosystems, regionally, you want to get a big win on the board. Berlin, what do you think Berlin's big win in the media entrepreneurial ecosystem has been the last 10 years?
Culture?
What?
This young
Well, yeah, there's that. Any one particular company?
creative area.
There's a bunch, but I'm thinking of SoundCloud. Yeah, SoundCloud is internationally known. It's like a success there, so that's one of the ones that we think of as being a success so far. It's internationally well-known startup in the last 10 years. The 8th condition from Eisenberg is to tackle the cultural change head-on, and then you see the notion of policy here, so you need to reform legal, bureaucratic, and regulatory frameworks. So Eisenberg says if you have these 9 components, all of these things should lead to venture creation, new ventures, and it leads to the creation of an ecosystem and a vibrant business sector. So an entrepreneurial ecosystem is a region, an area within a city, within a state, within a part of town, like the Mitte region in Berlin. So it's a place that startups can congregate and have all the access and resources they need to not only start their business, but to grow their business and hopefully scale and make money and everyone's happy. So that's the notion and sort of the academic literature behind it. Eisenberg also writes about 6 distinct domains of the ecosystem. So the 6 things that really come together to make a successful entrepreneurial ecosystem are 1, policy, and again, this is a point for discussion that we can talk more about if you have questions. So that's really key. You'll see that with some of the European examples as well. It's policies that have led to the creation of many startups here in Europe. You need money, and so that's why the Steve Case, The Rise of the Rest, one of the reasons that Silicon Valley is kind of the ultimate is all the financing is there for the tech industry. So they congregate, and there are these cities access to capital. If you're in a smaller city, a smaller region, there are not going to be as many venture capitalists. There's not going to be as many people to fund your idea. So Case talks about, well, that's where crowdfunding comes in. The United States, crowdfunding used to only be donation driven. You couldn't have equity in it. You couldn't invest in it for an equity stake. But the Jobs Act of 2012, which stands for Jumpstart Our Businesses, small businesses, that passed, and they've taken 4 years to get those rules worked out. But in May of this year, so 2 months ago in the United States, they now allow equity-based crowdfunding. And you have to be a registered investor, and there's certain criteria and restrictions on that, on who can donate. But now you can basically raise money from anywhere in the world if it's accredited investor through crowdfunding in the United States. And I previously had areas that you could raise money in your company through crowdfunding devices. But as some people that have had hugely successful crowdfunding campaigns have pointed out or said, why would we give away equity if we can raise a ton of money for giving away this? So we'll see how that plays out. But finance is certainly very important for businesses. The culture is important of an area, having support, and then human capital, like Mr. Bomo was talking about earlier, and markets are important. So all of these things are similar to the pillars from the World Economic Forum in 2013. You also see the discussion of really looking at resources as key factors. All right, so with that, talking about resources, let's look at some theories. So one of the theories that you can use is the resource-based view on strategic management to examine some of these issues, because again, it's a question of resources, right? So typically what you find within the RBV theory is an organization, this typically a company, an organization, is using their resources, whether that's people, whether that's location, physical resources, human resources, etc., to obtain a sustained strategic competitive advantage over time. So that's what sets a person apart. So if you have a particular spokesperson for your company, like David Hasselhoff, and the other startup doesn't have David Hasselhoff, then the Hoff becomes a unique resource for like SoundCloud versus someone that doesn't have that. He explores enabling factors that lead to, again, competitive and strategic advantages and successes of accelerators, incubators, and then the startups they nurture. Little has been done on RBV and strategic entrepreneurship, despite arguments that the two are highly complementary. And we can define or think of strategic entrepreneurship. Sylvia challenged that. It's actually misspelled. It should be no A. But anyway, it's the strategic management, sorry, Sylvia, and deployment of resources for identifying and exploiting opportunities to form competitive advantages and thus superior performance in established firms or new ventures. So that's one sort of guiding theory we can use to look at entrepreneurial ecosystems. Another is resource dependency. I'm less familiar with these next two. My co-authors has done more in this space, but resource dependency is the idea that organizations are open systems. They have to, again, obtain resources to deliver products to customers, to receive money. The effectiveness of that depends on the organization's ability to satisfy demands of the external entities on which it depends. So firms depend on these external sources for survival, and then they prioritize ways to gain access for survival and growth. Then if you're looking at institutions, this was more from stuff we looked at with educational pedagogy that we were examining, but institutional isomorphism says that as an industry grows, so as these startups, whether that's media startups, grow, you tend to find them becoming increasingly similar in structure, culture, and output. So most cities you can go to and find now these cooperative working spaces, these accelerators, these incubators, they all offer the same set of services. They all look alike. They're all like these hipster millennials, that go in and wear jeans and have coffee and beer. And so again, the industry starts to look the same, right? So that's something that explains that. You reduce the heterogeneity, and this is designed to have a positive impact on the industry. So there's three isomorphic processes: political influence, so coercive effects, mimetic, where again you try to copy each other as a response to uncertainty, and then normative processes. So this would be where, like in the journalism industry, they all come from newspapers, right? Do they all come from the same background? Or in social networks, or do they have different networks? Do you find, are you able to go outside your existing norms and practices within the industry? Which is why a lot of times, like in the newspaper industry, for outside talent, because they've become such a normative, standardized practice. Some of the things you guys are working on, like she just left, but as well. And there's another within ecosystems. Another one is organizational ecology, which makes sense. How do I put that back? Oops, sorry. All right, so organizational ecology is another theory, which if you're talking about ecosystems ecology makes sense as well. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. We're good. All right. Any questions on some of those theories? So you can see how what we're talking about, the theoretical perspective, is important if you're doing research to guide kind of what you're looking at. And with ecosystems having all of these resources, doing that. You'll have to let me know how we're on top. All right, so let's look at 4 media entrepreneurial ecosystems. In the United States, we're going to look at North Carolina and New York. In Europe, we're going to look at Belgium and Berlin. In a way, if you think about it, North Carolina is kind of an emerging entrepreneurial ecosystem. New York is very much an established media entrepreneurial ecosystem, one of the best in the world. In Europe, Berlin, to an extent, is kind of an emerging entrepreneurial ecosystem. They're very well established. They're still growing and developing. And Belgium, the project I'm going to talk about, has been there for over a decade, so it's very much an established media entrepreneurial ecosystem. So, the North Carolina case study, this comes from what I presented in New York. We did a case study looking at the triangle and triad. So the triangle is Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. The triad is Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem area, about an hour and a half, 2 hours apart in North Carolina. What I looked at was 4 companies or organizations that identified as either a cooperative working space, an accelerator, an incubator, or a combination of those services. Now, what's unique about this, American Underground, so I looked at HQ Raleigh, HQ Greensboro, the Citrix Red Hat Accelerator. Red Hat is a core company that uses Linux, open source. It's a big company in the Triangle. And then Citrix was out of California. They acquired a startup in the Triangle, and now they have an accelerator partnership. The co-founders of the company that created Citrix they were at the DNC. They spoke this week in the United States. And then American Underground is the one that's unique to media. So one of the largest broadcasting companies in the Triangle area in North Carolina is Capital Broadcasting Company. They own 2 television networks. WRAL is the most well-known, and they grew out of a radio network. So they were a broadcasting company. They created American Underground in 2010. So this is a cooperative working space with accelerators and incubator programs that was specifically founded by a media company, although their assets are beyond just media, the startups they facilitate. So we chose this because these 2 regions have always been kind of an exemplar of an entrepreneurial ecosystem that has all of these things I've just been talking about. There's approximately 1,800 high-growth companies created in this region in a 20-year period with 40,000 jobs and creating over $7 billion in private capital. This is the triad, Winston-Salem, High Point, Greensboro, and you see just right next door is Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill down here. It's called the Triangle because it creates a triangle. And I guess this is the triad because triangle is already taken. Yep. All right, so from a research standpoint, we wanted to know what resources did these parent organizations, so does Capital Broadcasting allocate toward these efforts? We wanted to know what resources these programs provided to startups and to entrepreneurs, and we wanted to know what resources, how they work together as part of this larger entrepreneurial ecosystem. Again, so what I did on-site, that's me at American Underground with Texas Tech. We do our guns up thing, and not literally shooting anybody, but that's just what we do. So that's me at the Underground, and I observed and visited many of these. I did in-depth interviews with executives there. We reviewed news articles, press releases, lots of materials with that, and then also reviewed social media sites for examining this. So what did we find? We found that some of these things I've been talking about. What resources do they allocate? Well, space. So they have physical space. They have, so they dedicate full-time employees and other staff members to maintaining these. Those are the primary things, so space and people and money to this. So on average, these programs gave between $20,000 and $150,000 to each startup that took part, like in an accelerator program. American Underground has 65,000 square feet spread out over 3 campuses. They currently have 250 startups in 3 buildings, and the goal is to triple that in the next few years. HQ Raleigh has 10,000 square feet of space, and they're expanding to 85,000 square feet. They have 350 startups that are there. To HQ Raleigh, there's 3.5 full-time employees. To run HQ Greensboro, there's 4 full-time employees. And as we'll talk more about this later, but HQ Greensboro emerged, they licensed out the name, the HQ name, and kind of spun off from HQ Raleigh. And then the Citrix Red Hat had 5 people that ran that. And American Underground, this probably is more now, but had almost 10 employees total. And they're kind of the big case study. They're what Google for Entrepreneur Tech Hub. There's about maybe a dozen of those around the world, unless it's changed. And so that's one of the locations. And if you're a member of that, you get access to all the other ones. So there's one in Berlin that we'll talk about. So if someone came from the Triangle and wanted to use the facilities through Google for Entrepreneur Tech Hub, they could go to the factory in Mita and have access to all of that, or they could go to the Capital Factory in Austin, Texas. They're all around the world, so that's a key asset for American Underground. Yeah. Here is Adam Klein, the director, sort of American Underground, saying about 10 people across the Underground. We've been slow to add staff. Oh yeah, so they keep growing and expanding. They have a digital agency, a media digital marketing agency that they acquired called Exit, also an event company, Exit Event, that they acquired. And so American Underground is very much a Triangle success story. But they've deliberately been slow to grow. I mean, you see they have the most staff, but they've been deliberate with that. They want to be lean, so they want entrepreneurial lean startup methodology, figure out how to support it, and not add a lot of payroll. They're relatively small to like a Boston hub or New York, but they are quick and nimble with that process. This is one of the guys that went on to found HQ Greensboro. So he was sitting there and was just blown away that there were all these people right there and had instant access to capital. So the guy got up at the end of the table, goes to his office. They have a $50,000 contract at the end of the day. So you don't get that working out of a coffee shop. All these places have coffee, they have beer. It's kind of a coffee shop mentality, but it's designed specifically to foster and grow entrepreneurs. So it's very social, and they usually do weekly events. They have pizza, they do mentors, they bring in guest speakers. So again, mentoring, access to information, access to knowledge, access to other entrepreneurs with similar strengths is a key component of this. When I was at HQ Raleigh, I observed there was a person there with a startup who did design services, right? So other startups would come there and pay her to create the marketing, create the design, create the website, and she has an instant customer base physically in the same space. The other thing we looked at was resources. So what do they provide to startups? They provide, again, money in some cases. Mentoring is a big thing that they provide. physical office space, the ability to grow your business, printers, meeting spaces, coffee, all the things we have here. But then you have intangible resources like, again, PR, marketing, expertise, the ability to pitch your product before experts, have access to investors. Most venture firms will have VCs. Some of them will have a physical office space in the shared working space and maybe have office hours like once a week. Some of them have they all have partnerships with universities, which I'll kind of talk a lot more later. Duke University was a founding partner in American Underground. It's in Durham, their main facility. North Carolina Central University also has a hub there. University of North Carolina does pitch events there and has a presence with it as well. The HQ Raleigh has a partnership with NC State's Entrepreneurship Clinic. So they actually have students do projects each semester that they work on with the startups. So they have clients and space and have a physical clinic within the space there. And so a lot of mentoring, a lot of guidance. They usually have an entrepreneur in residence each semester or each year that rotates, someone with experience that holds office hours as well. So training is very much a component of this. Was there a question? The other thing we found was this notion of engaging the community. Capital Broadcasting in the Triangle has long had a civic mission. Yes, they make money, but they give back to the community. They sponsor, the plays and music and have funds. It's just very charitable. So that's baked into the DNA of American Underground. They want to engage the university students. This year is what they do, college night. They do it once a year, so hundreds of students from across North Carolina will come to American Underground's campus, and all the startups there are able to showcase and meet. So startup founders can network with students. They can tell them about job openings, internships. Students can learn about that and see the space. And they work with the university, right? So American Underground has these universities that were founding partners, and they work together in this space. The city of Raleigh actually created a position. They have an entrepreneurship and innovation manager who has these ties and manages this. So that was something that we found that was important. And Adam Klein said, I don't think you get into running an American Underground or HQ Raleigh to make money. I think you do it because it's impactful in a region. And that was what Capital Broadcasting folks had in mind at the outset. We don't need this to make money. We need to have a deep and wide impact in our city and in the Triangle. And if we can break even, we're thrilled. So that would run contrary to what we think of with a sustained competitive advantage if we're using the resource-based view, because they're not making a competitive advantage. But long-term, if you take a long-term picture, they're doing it to keep student entrepreneurs from North Carolina, from Duke University, from NC State, from North Carolina Central that have come from all over the world, from starting a company, leaving, taking it elsewhere. So the idea is that you have this pipeline, this ecosystem, this pipeline that's part of it, that flows from the university to the startup space, and then you create that company. So it's all about a regional impact. And Raleigh has supporting startups in Raleigh, and then Durham and Chapel Hill are right next door, but they take a regional view of it. So they're looking at it. Yes, they're competing from a city, they're competing from a university perspective, but regionally it's all about supporting that ecosystem and growing up the ecosystem there. All right, so I just said a minute ago, if we're discussing this, the idea that property-based and knowledge-based skills to attain a sustained competitive advantage, that would be consistent with RBV. But the third finding conflicts with that because this community motive is not a profit motive. They're not doing it to make money long-term. That's not the ultimate goal. And this is consistent with Eisenberg's research that talks about the entrepreneurial ecosystem. He talks about having a culture of cooperation. All of those components and things I set up before have to work together. So ultimately, proximity to a university is an important factor. And what's happening with that is this HQ model. So they're expanding that model statewide. There was a cooperative working space in Charlotte called Packard Place. It rebranded as HQ Charlotte. So now if you join HQ Charlotte, HQ Raleigh, or HQ Greensboro, you have access to all of those. So my friend Betsy, she runs Tech Talent South. That's a coding school. in Charlotte now. They were in Atlanta, but now Charlotte is their headquarters. And so they are involved in some of these cooperative working spaces. So Betsy has a presence and a location at HQ Raleigh and also now HQ Charlotte. So if someone in her company were to go to Raleigh, they could.
Betsy,
Yeah, I was on the panel with you, yeah. So that continues to grow and be very successful. So there's this idea of now taking this regional model and expanding it to the state. And they specifically said, the HQ folks, they're looking for towns in North Carolina with universities. They want to have that university connection. So Charlotte has UNC Charlotte and is a banking financial institution, one of the top in the United States. So as they grow and expand, they're going to strategically look at that. So they have a very vibrant ecosystem as well. And then Wilmington has the beach, and they're creating what's called Silicon Beach. Again, trying to be clever. But they have the university there is the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. They have a innovation and entrepreneurship center. They have a number of cooperative working spaces and accelerator programs as well, largely in the tech space. But it would make sense going to Eisenberg's to really excel on marine stuff. There's components there at the beach, or like surfing or stuff like that. So that's in North Carolina. How are we on time?
Very good too.
Yeah, good.
Still counts.
All right, cool.
Beyond 45 minutes.
Okay, good. Got more info than I thought, or I talked longer than I thought. All right, so New York. Let me talk a little about New York. Now, this policy thing and the role of the government is important. New York, the mayor's office in New York has a media and entertainment office, and a lot of the efforts from that office are funded from, films and television. New York has a lot of film, obviously, and TV, so they charge a tax to these companies that come there, and that funds many of the efforts from the office. So New York City Media Lab is one of the things I'm going to talk about, but they have so many different things in the tech space and in the media space. New York probably is the ultimate example of a media entrepreneurial ecosystem. When we were there in May, we went to Twitter, there was Facebook, I went to Twitter, we went to Facebook. There was all sorts of media companies out the door. You just step on the street, and they're all right there. You have density that we'll talk about. So there's just so much there.